Hello, Illinois. Peace and blessings. Welcome. I am Rima Kamran from the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, and we are welcoming you this evening to Muslims Collaborify on CAN TV 21. We are streaming live online at CAN TV/hotline, and in the next 25 minutes, join us as we start to talk about coming to our senses and learning about the senses. Our guest tonight, I'm honored to be joined by Chicago pillar in our community, Talat Uthman, and Walid Sankari, who is the census coordinator at the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition. I serve as the executive director at the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, and we're so excited to have you here this evening. So tonight is the first of 3 shows on the census. We're going to start talking about what is the census, why is it important, and why should we care. The state of Illinois has one of the most largest populations of Muslims, estimated at 500,000. And we are this year going to be talking about the census. We are a diverse, vibrant, and complex, complicated community. As you can see from the graph up here, we have a population that includes South Asian, Arab, and African American, along with the Latino East Asian as one of the largest growing populations. The census for our communities is all about being counted. But let's talk a little bit about what is the census and why should we care. The U.S. Constitution requires that every person living in the United States is counted every 10 years. So this year, this particular census will be taking place in March through July of 2020. As we were talking about the census, we want to talk about why it's important for our communities to be counted. It is our diversity that makes us harder to count. I would like to bring in our guest, Talat Uthman. Sidi Talat, a form of respect. Sidi is a Palestinian-American businessman. He's an investor and a pillar of our community in the Chicagoland. He's the president of Grove Financial. Sidi Talat, your family has been here for 100 years. Is that really true, or is that just a rumor in Chicagoland?
No, it's really a fact. My father came in 1919 when he was 19 years old.
Wow.
And can you imagine a 19-year-old from a village in Palestine coming 10,000 miles by boat?
Wow.
To a country that he doesn't know the language, and has very few people that he would find. Takes a lot of courage, but alhamdulillah, he did very well. You want me to talk a little more?
Yes, of course. So tell us when you were born. When your father came here in 1919, and your family has been here for 100 years this year, 2019. Do you remember the census as you were growing up? Do you remember being a part of it? And also, could you talk a little bit about how the world has changed since? I'm sure that your father has spoken to you about how the fabric of the United States has changed over these 100 years. Could you talk a little bit about your experience?
Yes. Well, a little bit more about my father. When he came in 1919, 1925, he went back to Palestine, got married, built a house, and then came back to Chicago with my mother. Then they had 3 children, and the Depression came a few years later. He lost everything. He was saying he put money in the bank in the morning and it closed in the afternoon.
Wow.
So he went back then to Palestine, and in the 30s, then I was born, 1936 to be exact. And then he came back here to see how the situation is. The war broke out, so we were separated until after the war. He came back, and then half of the family came with him, and I came with him in 1947. Interesting enough, I just found out a couple of months ago a picture of his passport, and my picture wasn't in the same passport. So we came on the same things have changed.
There you
Anyway,
go.
that was the situation. So
Yeah.
as far as the census is concerned, of course, the census is not new. It's not new in the United States. The Khalifa Umar, radiallahu anh, he started a consensus during his Khalifa. And so the Egyptians had a census back in the days of the Ramses and that period. So census have been taken throughout the country. Now, why is it important for us to have a census here in America? Because the resources are divided based on the census. They identify which communities are deserving, which communities have a larger population, which communities have a certain underprivileged neighborhoods, and so on. And so it's important that everybody be counted. But even if there's no economic benefit to it, it's important to be counted. You
Yes.
have to be in the count. You've got to be there in order to be counted and have a seat at the table of power.
Absolutely. So this is a great segue into, you've given us a history of census. So it's not just something that we do in America. This has been going on historically in every country. But for us, this 2020 will be the year that we will be talking about the census. This happens every 10 years. Waleed, do you remember taking the census?
So the last time the census came around, I was in high school.
So 2010.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I remember my parents worrying about the census back when, like, phones, you texted with them with each button and it took forever.
Okay.
My dad was filling it out and he started asking me specific details.
Okay. But
text
you
me this
remember
and
it
that.
being a part of conversations in your family?
Yeah, I remember it being, especially because I'm pretty sure we lost a congressional seat that year. And that's what most people were concerned about, I think.
Right, and let's talk about that. Sidi Uthman just told us about why it's important to do the census. Waleed alluded to the importance of making sure that we're politically represented. So we come to why should we care as a community about the census? First of all, it is our right to be counted. As a democracy, each and every individual deserves and has a right to be counted. There's $700 billion in federal funds of our schools, roads, and programs and community that go into the census that will help determine where the census dollars are allocated. Census data is protected by federal law, and the census is a fair and complete count. Every race, income, background, age, including babies, need to make sure that they're a part of the census. And as Waleed just mentioned, political representation and census is one of the key things that will help us determine maps for the elections as well as seats in elections. So as we're talking about census, I think that it's really important for us to talk about what are some of the challenges that our communities face as they're getting ready to talk about the census and get counted in the census. Sidi Uthman, what are some of the things that you have found in the community that folks hesitate to actually fill out the census? What are things that you think that
Yes.
causes that?
Well, Waleed comes at a later stage, and so the environment has changed somewhat, where people are more free to participate in the census. But during the earlier days, the majority were immigrants. And immigrants didn't trust the government. They didn't trust their governments where they came from. They didn't trust the government here, and they were just fearful of the unknown. They didn't know how the information they provide is going to be used. And so that was an inhibiting factor. But that started to change. As the community became more comfortable, then there were more participation. I wonder at this time whether there will be some hesitancy as well because of the environment against immigration and immigrants and so on. Hopefully that will not take place. The positive side of that today is that these communities have become empowered. They began to see the benefits of getting involved and participating in the social life, the political life of the society where they live. and their children are much more involved, and they are much more accommodative to the existing system and understand the benefits of being part of that system and be counted. You see the ones that are running for Congress, those who are running for state representation, those who are running for school boards and so on. This is something we did not see 20 years ago. We are seeing it now because they are beginning to feel more empowered, and that's a very positive sign, and that's positive for the census, I would think.
Absolutely. So I think that you hit on a key important point for us to consider, that many people bring their own experiences being immigrants to this country, and then with that comes the fear and the hesitation of completing the census. Waleed, you graduated college. You are a young, newly married. You're a young, newly married couple. What are some other things that you find might be causing folks to hesitate from taking part in the census?
Hesitation to take part in the census. I think that, as Sidi Talat said, a big part of it is that, in a way, our communities have matured and we have become more civically engaged and active. But since 2010, think about how the climate has shifted. Skepticism of the federal government has, kind of erupted in a number of ways. You see, the erosion of civil liberties since, in the past 18 years has given everybody a reason to think twice about it. And if that wasn't enough, coming from the head of the executive branch, this, push for a citizenship question on the census, politicized it in a way that it was certainly never intended to be. Like you said, it was perhaps the only federal program outlined in the Constitution. It's something ancient Romans did, ancient Egyptians did. The census is the most elementary civic program that any society can undertake. And yet seeing it being politicized and incorporating, hostile or radical views, or, even though perhaps the end goal wasn't even to have the citizenship question on. Perhaps in the end, if it was just to create that hesitancy or to exacerbate it, to an extent, a lot of people feel that it might have already worked.
Right. And I think you bring up an important point that we should address. The census is confidential. This is really important that we continue to talk about. The hesitancy that we've talked about just now comes from making sure that we are not sharing information that we don't want to be out in the open, or you might be hesitating based on this criteria that was put ahead but didn't come through, which is the citizenship question. So Title 13 provides confidential protections and safeguards disclosure and misuse of any census data, which means that census data can only be used for statistical purpose. No information can be disclosed. No personal census information can be disclosed for 72 years, which includes names, addresses, social security numbers, as well as telephone numbers. And Census Bureau staff who have access to personal information are sworn to protect that information for life, and they could be subject to about $250,000 in fines. So as you can see, that the Census Bureau takes the confidentiality of the census very, very seriously, and it is something that policymakers and advocates are working to ensure that this compliance is undertaken by the administration as well as the U.S. Census Bureau, because these are critical protections for our communities. So talking about the census, we've talked a little bit about what is the hesitancy. Let's talk a little bit about what are the benefits of taking the census. We talked about the allocation of $800 billion of federal funding. And this would be crucial to the well-being of our communities and families, which means that the more people counted in our community, the more funding that we receive. We also talked about census as building civic power. Census data is important to our democracy, and this helps determine our political representation, which includes how many seats our states will get in the House of Representatives and in Congress, and then how districts are drawn from state and local government. So as we talk about that, let's let's talk a little bit about what is actually the census. Waleed, what actually does the census even entail? We've been talking about the importance of it and what it actually means and what it entails in terms of we have to fill it out as a community. What is the census actually? What do you have to do for it?
The census actually is a piece of paper that will come in the mail that tells you that it's time to take the census. This is kind of a mandatory civic obligation for every American, every resident of this country. It's not determined by citizenship or voting eligibility or age or anything. And essentially it asks, it's per household. And it's a questionnaire that asks how many people live in this household, how old are they, anybody else who lives in this household who's not necessarily a resident of the household. It includes the nature of the household, like if it's owned or rented, or asks basic demographic questions like sex or ethnicity or age, and then lather, rinse, repeat for each member of the household.
So you see the form right up here on the screen. So it's a 9-question form. You can see it up here, and you can see a sample on our website as well. And it basically has 9 questions. And as Waleed was mentioning, there are questions about a person's age, what their date of birth is. It does not specifically ask about your status in terms of if you are a citizen or if you are undocumented specifically. It does ask you about, it has questions about your ethnic heritage, and it gives you the opportunity to fill out specifically where you may come from. So for example, if you put a specific ethnic origin, you can then talk specifically about where your family comes from. So it's a simple 9-question form. Oh, we have a caller. Hello, caller. Welcome to Muslims Collaborify. Do you have a question or comment?
It is actually a question. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Yes.
My name is Muhammad. I'm from the Arab American Family Services, and I am the census coordinator over there. I had a few questions from the clients that I've spoken to when I asked them about, when I told them about the importance of taking the census, but there was a common question that I had.
Please, go ahead. What's your question?
So the question, I know it says according to the United States Code under Title 13, Chapter 7, Offenses and Penalties, the subchapter 2, if you are over the age of 18 and you refuse to answer all the census questions, you are subject to fine up to $100. And if you give any false answers, you are subject to fine $5. However, Census Bureau use any type of force if a person refuses to answer the door for the census taker or the person who answers the census question.
So the question that the caller is asking specifically is about if there is a fine associated with not answering the census. I can tell you that we will be having our Census Bureau colleagues on in our upcoming shows, so we'll go more deeper into this conversation. But generally, it is a requirement by anyone and everyone who is in the United States of America on April 1st, 2020 to fill out the census. Young, old, a newborn baby who might be 1 hour old, and someone who might be in the last stages of their life. So in terms of the caller's question, what would happen if you didn't fill out the census? If you don't fill out the census, there are a couple of things that automatically go into effect. One is that a member of the Census Bureau community will be at your door. They're going to come and talk to you about why didn't you fill out the census? We don't see a census for your family. So you will get a visit from the Census Bureau. You will get follow-up visits until they find that you have filled out the census. So this is an opportunity for us to make sure that we're all counted. And we will continue this conversation with our colleagues from the Census Bureau as well to get more information about that. in terms of, let's talk a little bit about how do you respond to the census. This is a great segue into our next question. So Waleed, how does one actually respond to the census? You said that we get a paper in the mail and we'll be talking about the census that will give us some information about the census, but how do I actually go about filling out the census? You showed us a form. What else? What are the other ways that we can do that?
So this year, there are 3 ways actually that you can fill out the census. You will be receiving the census invitation in the mail, and you may do it in paper. So some homes will receive the full census sheet in the mail, and others can be received in the mail by request. And then you just fill it out, put it back in the mail, and mail it back. Another way you can do it is by the phone. So on the census invitation, you will use the information specific to your address provided by the Census Bureau. You can call in. They have over 12 languages that they can, take you through it with. So you will be on the phone with a census taker, and they will ask you the questions one by one, and you can respond that way. And new this year is the first year that they'll be taking the census online as well. So you'll use the credentials given to you in the mail, and you can log on and take it online, and it'll take about 10 minutes. And I encourage anybody with easy internet access to just take it online, spend 10 minutes doing it, and you don't have to worry about census takers knocking on your door.
Oh, that's important. How do you plan to take it, Sidi Uthman? Are you going to do it online or via phone, or do you think you'll just prefer the paper form?
I'm going to do it by paper.
You think paper? You want to just go old school?
There's a generation gap here. Yes, I'll do it by paper.
Okay.
You said it's confidential for about 72 years?
Yes.
I think at my age, that's safe.
I think you're safe. Yeah, I think you're good. You're good to go in terms of that. So I wanted to share with all of you a wonderful video that has been made by the Gail Borden Library. A wonderful video that talks about census in their community. So let's
transition back to civilian life and began serving your communities.
For you. Come back to it. I'm sorry. So let's talk a little bit more about the census as a whole. We talked about the hesitations that folks may have for the video for the census. We've talked about what are some of the challenges, including confidentiality, as well as just apathy. People might just choose not to fill out the census. What are some of the things that you would advise people as they are dealing with others in their community that might say, hey, I don't think it's important. Sidi Talat, if you meet somebody and they're just like, I don't think it's a big deal, I don't want to fill out the census, it doesn't even matter. What would be advice for our viewers today that you would tell them how to approach members in the community who might hesitate or still be, a little not too involved in that?
Well, first of all, give them the comfort that it is confidential, and they should not have any fear that there will be reprisals on them.
Okay.
Secondly, to let them know where they can get some support. There are many organizations, I believe, in the Muslim community who are doing the census, and they should go to where they feel comfortable with the organization or the group that is doing the census that they feel comfortable with. They should go there and get whatever information they need and get their support. And finally, I would say, they need to be convinced, and probably it shouldn't be a major problem to convince them that their filling the census counts. They become part not only of the community as a whole, but the society as a whole. And that, as was said earlier, it's empowerment. And unless everyone participates, everyone in the community participates in it, we're not going to get that seat at the table of power.
Absolutely.
And that should be the goal.
Absolutely. And having trusted voices like yourself, voices in our community centers, in our mosques, as well as Sidi Talat was talking about, organizations that we have been doing the work and will continue to the work. You can find more information at the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition website, www.ilmuslimciviccoalition.org. We're going to play for you a wonderful video that talks a little bit about the census, the Elgin Census. This was created by the Gail Borden Public Library, and we're excited. They're a partner of ours, and we're excited to share this video with you.
My name is Carla, and these are my two boys. We live in Elgin, and we will make sure to get counted in the 2020 census. Most of my life, I've lived in Elgin. I grew up in Elgin. I graduated from Elgin schools. I work in Elgin. I'm raising my family in Elgin. Elgin provides a space where I feel safe, where it brings diversity, where there's lots to do for my family. During those special times, my family and I get together to eat, to play, to listen to music, and have a great time. We are getting counted so that people in Elgin will be cared for. The information that I provide to the census will be safe. The number of people counted bring critical federal funding for programs such as free and reduced lunch for children in need, affordable health care funding for families in need, and much more.
Thank you.
Please help everyone in
Gail
Elgin.
Borden Public Library as they talked about the census, and we're excited to be working with many communities, including the Elgin community. So tonight we've been talking about on Muslims Collaborify, CAN TV 21. We've been talking about the importance of being counted and the importance of the census as a whole. We want to make sure that you continue to be a part of this conversation, and we want to make sure that you yourself pledge to take the census. So one of the key things that I want to share with you is go check out our website. Make sure that you check it out at www.ilmuslimciviccoalition. Your to-do actions for tonight are to go to the website and fill out a pledge form. Make sure that you're talking to your family and friends about the census and you're spreading the word. You are a big part of that conversation for our communities, and I want to make sure that you are thinking about our communities working together to make sure that there is an accurate and complete count. Join our efforts to make sure that we're counted as a whole. As we come to the end of our program, I want to remind you of some upcoming events. We have the Inner City Muslim Action Network will be having their annual fundraising dinner on Saturday, December the 14th. It's a wonderful evening where we celebrate the end of year for the wonderful work that Iman does in our communities. We will also remind you about the American Medina, which is the Stories of Muslim Chicago, an exhibit that is open to the public which started on October 21st. So this is Muslims Collaborify. Watch us on Mondays at 7:30 p.m. We have only scratched the surface. My guests tonight have been Sidi Talat Uthman and Walid Sankari, who is our census coordinator. We've only scratched the surface and have so much more to talk about. Join us soon as we talk about census in the coming weeks. Thank you again. Remember, collaborate, amplify, and build civic power. Have a wonderful evening and see you next week.